Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to our GitKraken reality show. And today we're going to talk about the ignoring the files. First of all, I'm going to try to explain you why do you need to do so, if you need to do so, and then how to do this. First of all, what is the ignoring? Ignoring it's when you don't want some of the files to be under the control of your repo, so they won't be committed. That may be important when some of the files, some of the folders, it's specifically for your personal use, like for example data folders, and you don't want them to get into your repo, into the remote one, but they will still will be locally. Anyway, here you can see I've already added some of the files. I didn't commit them yet, but still. And let's say that some of these files or folders I don't want to be committed, but still I want to keep them locally. For example, I have these images folders where I have the images, and I don't want this one to be committed, so it will go to my remote repository, but I still want to have them on my computer because these images is kind of crucial for my project. I use them to represent on the website or something like this. It actually doesn't really matter. The thing is, I just don't want this folder to be committed. And in this case, something that called ignoring may help us. How does it work? So I have the folder, and I want this folder or some files of this folder to be ignored. First of all, I can ignore some specific files. For example, I can ignore this particular image. So in this case, I can choose this image, ignore, and then click ignore 1.jpg. In this case, I confirm ignoring. I will have this new Gitignore file in my commit, sorry. And also I can find this Gitignore file, and this is how it looks like. So when you started to ignore something, the Git automatically creates this .gitignore file where it stores the information about the files or the folder that you want to ignore. When I say ignore, once again, it means that this folder will not be pushed or committed by your system. Moreover, if, for example, you want to ignore the whole folder, you can the same way go to this folder which you have, right click, and then let's do it this way. Ignore all files in images, in folder images. If I click this one, it will automatically ignore and stop tracking. It will automatically add to the Gitignore, as you can see. Doesn't refresh. This is our Gitignore. It automatically adds a new line which says that now ignore all the files inside the images. So that means whatever I will add to this folder or remove, it will not be captured by the Git, and finally will not be somehow tracked by the Git. Another thing, why do you probably need to do that? I mean, like, just the basic explanation of this rule is that you want, for example, you've initiated the package.json, you've uploaded some libraries via packet npm or some other package manager. It doesn't really matter. As you can see here, I have the package.json and the node module folder where I keep some of the libraries. And the good practice is does not commit the node modules folders. So it's a bad practice to commit any libraries folders, including node modules, of course, and push them to the remote repo, because all the libraries are supposed to be installed locally by every developer. You don't need to commit them. First of all, because it's quite big amount of the files. You can see that here, for example, node modules contains almost 500 files, and that's depending on the fact that I've only installed 2 libraries. So the good practice is not is ignore such folders. So what we can do about it? We can try on the GitKraken, click ignore all files and do not modules. That's the first option. And another option is to ignore it via file. There is also a way how you can ignore it not via GitKraken, but you can go to the directly to the file and write down here the actual folder or file, if you want, which you want to ignore. So you write down node modules, then we save it, and as you can see in the Gitignore, we've added these folders, and you can see that there is no longer node modules folder in unstaged files. So that means automatically that our node modules folder will not go to the remote repo. Another situation when, for example, what may happen is that when you have the folder and inside this folder you want to ignore something. You can see here that inside our data we have inside folder which we also want to ignore, and we can ignore this one, like ignore all files in inside folder. And another way is to ignore it by adding the line into Gitignore. The funny facts about the Git that you can see that I have empty folder up there, and this empty folder we don't have it inside unstaged files. The Git, the funny part about Git is that if you created a folder and it doesn't contain any file, it automatically won't be tracked. So as long as the folder empty, the Git will ignore it automatically. That's the funny fact I decided that you need to know anyway. And probably the last thing that I want you to tell about the Git ignore, the rules of the Git ignore, is to ignoring the specific type of the files. It's when, for example, you want to ignore all the files with the specific extension. So to do so, let's say that inside the data folder we want to ignore all the files that have the extension .txt, and let's create another file that's, for example, called text3, but this time it will be JS, so the different extension. So what we're gonna do, we want to ignore these all txt files inside this folder, inside the data folder, but the JS text3.js keep tracked. So we go to the Gitignore, then we write down a new line set data, and then slash, then I put star sign .txt. That should automatically says that inside the data folder all the files that contains extension .txt, well, actually they end up with the .txt, should be ignored. So let's save it, and as you can see inside the data we are no longer tracked these .txt files. We only have .js. Funny fact that it doesn't work for the inside folder which is inside the data. Anyway, this was the basic rules of the Git ignoring. Let's make the commit, by the way, with the Git ignore and all that stuff. So we say Git ignore example, and then we push, and luckily for us, as you can see, there is no any node modules folder, any data folders, but they are still locally. So the actual code will go to the remote repo, but the files that we want to ignore but keep on our local system will be on our local system. So this is how the Git ignore works. Thanks for your attention. If you have any questions or suggestions about what you would like to see in the future, just let me know in the comments, and have a good code.